In 2008, a finger bone smaller than a coin emerged from a Siberian cave and revealed a human species no one had ever seen. Scientists named them Denisovans, and for a brief moment the mystery seemed solved. But that bone was never the real discovery. It was merely the first clue in a case that would lead somewhere far stranger. When geneticists began scanning the genomes of living populations for traces of this lost species, they found exactly what they expected in Aboriginal Australians, up to 6% Denisovan ancestry locked inside their DNA. Then they found something they could not explain. Buried beneath the Denisovan layer was another signal, older, deeper, and belonging to no species ever documented. Evidence exists. The body does not. This is not a story about Denisovans. This is a story about what the Denisovans were carrying inside them, and why Aboriginal Australians are the only people on Earth who preserved the proof. We were wrong about Asia being a human highway for only two species. The old textbooks painted a simple picture. Homo sapiens left Africa, encountered Neanderthals in Europe, and marched across an empty Asia to colonize the world. That picture has collapsed. The genomic evidence now suggests that ancient Asia was not a corridor. It was an arena, crowded with multiple human species whose identities we are only beginning to glimpse. And the clearest window into that vanished world exists not in fossils or caves, but in the living DNA of Aboriginal Australians who have been carrying these genetic secrets for 50,000 years without anyone knowing what to look for. But here is where the case breaks open. In 2018, researchers analyzing Aboriginal and Melanesian genomes identified a statistical ghost. Approximately 2% of their ancestry could not be assigned to any known species. It was not Homo sapiens, it was not Neanderthal, it was not Denisovan. The algorithms detected a signature of interbreeding with something else entirely. A population that had diverged from the human family tree so long ago that its genetic fingerprint barely resembles anything in our databases. A species proven by code, erased by stone. Scientists initially assumed the signal was noise, a statistical artifact of incomplete reference genomes. That assumption did not survive scrutiny. Multiple independent studies using different methodologies confirmed the presence of this unknown ancestry. It was not random error. It was a genuine biological signature of contact with a human species that has left no fossils, no tools, and no trace except the fragments of DNA preserved in populations that remained isolated long enough to keep them intact. The next clue was even stranger. When researchers mapped where this ghost signal concentrated, the pattern defied every expectation. It was not strongest in populations living near known fossil sites. It was strongest in Aboriginal Australians and certain Philippine indigenous groups like the Aita, populations separated by thousands of kilometers of open ocean from any location where archaic human fossils have ever been found. The mystery deepened further when scientists examined the Denisovans themselves. Genetic analysis revealed the Denisovan populations were not a single unified species. They had fragmented into at least 3 distinct groups separated for over 300,000 years, long enough to become as genetically different from each other as modern humans are from Neanderthals. One group lived in Siberia, another inhabited mainland Asia, a third occupied the islands of Southeast Asia and Oceania. And within that third group, the one that interbred with the ancestors of Aboriginal Australians, there were traces of something older still. The Denisovans who passed their genes to Aboriginal ancestors were themselves carrying DNA from an unknown archaic human. This means Aboriginal Australians inherited a genetic layer that had already been inherited once before. They carry the echo of an echo, the genetic memory of a species that interbred with Denisovans long before Denisovans ever encountered modern humans. And this is where the suspects emerge. 2 enigmatic human species once lived in the islands of Southeast Asia, precisely the region where this interbreeding must have occurred. On the island of Flores, Homo floresiensis survived until approximately 50,000 years ago, a diminutive human species with a brain one-third the size of ours, who nevertheless crafted sophisticated stone tools and hunted giant rats and dwarf elephants. On the island of Luzon in the Philippines, Homo luzonensis lived until at least 67,000 years ago, another small-bodied human species with a bizarre mixture of primitive and modern anatomical features that has baffled every attempt at classification. Either of these species could theoretically account for the ghost signal in Aboriginal DNA. Either could be the source of that deep archaic layer carried first by Denisovans and then passed to modern humans. Science cannot yet test this hypothesis. We have DNA from neither species. The tropical climates of their island homes destroyed any genetic material that might have survived. We are left with a crime scene full of evidence and no way to match it to the suspects we have identified. But absence of proof is not proof of absence. Something was there. Someone was there. The genetic signature is too consistent, too widespread, too deeply embedded in populations across Oceania to be coincidence or contamination. And the reason we can detect it at all comes down to one remarkable accident of geography and history. Australia became a vault. Approximately 50,000 years ago, the ancestors of Aboriginal Australians undertook something unprecedented. They crossed open ocean. There were no land bridges connecting the Asian mainland to Australia. Even during the lowest sea levels of the last ice age, deep oceanic trenches remained flooded, requiring deliberate water crossings of up to 90 kilometers. This was not accidental drifting. This was intentional navigation, the earliest confirmed maritime migration in human history. These first Australians did not find empty islands. Somewhere in the chain of islands they crossed, in the region scientists call Wallacea, they encountered Denisovans who were already carrying the genetic payload of even older interbreeding events. The contact was sustained, the genetic exchange was significant, and then something happened that made Aboriginal Australians unique among all human populations. They became isolated. Rising sea levels at the end of the Ice Age severed every connection. Australia became a continental island surrounded by treacherous currents and vast stretches of open water. For 50,000 years, Aboriginal populations experienced almost no genetic input from the outside world. We used to frame this isolation as a limitation. We were wrong. That isolation was not a prison, it was a preservation chamber. While mainland Asian populations experienced wave after wave of migration, farmers from the Yangtze Basin and pastoralists from Central Asia and seafaring populations from Taiwan, each new arrival diluting and overriding the genetic signatures of earlier inhabitants, Aboriginal Australians remained untouched. Every gene they carried 50,000 years ago, they still carry today. Every fragment of archaic ancestry that entered their genome during that initial migration has been maintained, undiluted through 2,000 generations. They are not merely witnesses to deep human history, they are its living archive. The only population on Earth where the complete genetic record of humans' first expansion into Oceania has been preserved intact. And this is why the ghost signal matters. This is why the unidentified archaic ancestry is not just a scientific curiosity, but a paradigm-shattering revelation. Somewhere in Aboriginal DNA is the proof of a human species that walked this earth alongside our ancestors, that survived long enough to interbreed with Denisovans, that passed their genes through Denisovans into modern humans, and that subsequently vanished so completely that 50,000 years of archaeological investigation has failed to produce a single confirmed fossil. A species witnessed by survivors. The implications cascade outward. If a single finger bone could reveal an entire species invisible to a century of archaeology, if a statistical anomaly in Aboriginal DNA could expose another species invisible even to genomics, then how much of human history remains completely unknown? How many species walked this earth and left nothing behind except the genetic fragments they passed to survivors? Aboriginal Australians did not choose to become the guardians of this record. History chose them. Their ancestors crossed impossible oceans, encountered impossible humans, survived impossible odds, and then remained isolated long enough to preserve what everyone else forgot. The evidence they carry is not written in stone. It is written in nucleotides, in base pairs, in the molecular architecture of every cell in their bodies. And that evidence says something the textbooks have not yet absorbed. The human family was larger, stranger, and more interconnected than we ever imagined. We are all hybrids. We are all archives. We are all carrying the genetic shadows of species we cannot name. History is no longer written in stone. It is written in DNA. Argue it.